welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am your co-host, Ray Russell here, bringing you yet another fun edition of the Stoop this week. And in order to answer your questions, the ones you sent into Bob, we're going to have to bring the man himself back onto the program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the program, the man himself, Bob Roop.
Well, thank you, Ray, and thank you out there for listening. It's good to be back with you. It's a big time in my week. I mean, I have things I do, but being able to communicate with fans and people out there, fans or whatever they are, listeners, is nice. Very few people my age have the ability, have the privilege of being able to do that. So I thank you for being there. Again, I'll say in advance, I wish you well. I hope everybody if you have problems, I hope they can be solved. And that if you are well, you stay well. And on that subject, I want to mention a dear friend of mine, Joe Malenko. He's got a medical problem right now it's not life-threatening, but it is pretty serious. It affects his heart. He's not too worried about it, but I am, because I love him. So what I'm asking is, it's not religious, it's not a prayer, but if you know Joe Malenko and you know what he looks like, visualize his picture or what he looks like in your mind, and take 10 seconds to send some brainwaves, your thoughts his way.
Positive vibes. How about that?
Positive vibes his way. And no, I'm telling you, this guy is a good man. He's a decent, caring human being. I would put him against Sid Vicious, and I would bet on him. And Sid's like 100 pounds heavier. So he's a tough dude, but he's not a bully. But he's ailing. And my belief is, I was reading up on this before we came on the show, or on the air. Electromagnetic brainwaves travel, and information is embedded in electromagnetic brainwaves that all our brains put out. So with that gobbledygook aside, look at a picture of Joe in your mind, or if you have to pull it up on your phone, and please just give 5 or 10 seconds of sending positive thoughts his way for his recovery. I believe, even though our brainwaves are only supposed to travel a short way away, I believe that if all of us, like 1,000 of us, are all thinking about him kind of at the same time, that maybe they'll combine and reach him and help him with his recovery. So please, if you could do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. But anyway, I thank you for doing that. And now we can get on to what you're here for, is to hear some wrestling stuff.
No, that was kind of wrestling related. Joe Malenko, of course, the son of Boris Malenko, the older brother of Dean Malenko. So definitely a speedy recovery to Joe. Hopefully everything's okay out there in his world right now. And I'm already sending out my positive thoughts and vibes for him, and hopefully, all is well fairly soon. And we have a fun report, here in the next couple episodes of the Stoop in regards to Joe and his health. But yeah, we are getting back into some more questions here, Bob. We got a couple more questions I added to the pile, but we're going to get to some we actually had last week that we didn't have the opportunity to get to. And it's going to be all over the place today, guys. So hopefully you have a fun time listening to some of these stories. And we're going to start off with some fun questions here in regards to, it's always fun when I look at this, the ICW, Angelo Poffo's ICW. In fact, on one of our other WrestleCopia programs right now, Regional Wrestling, me and one of my guest co-hosts, Steve Crawford, he's been doing a lot of digging, a lot of research into the history of the ICW promotion from the beginnings, right before they melted and mended with you guys there with the All-Star crew and things of that nature. We've talked a lot about 1979, and during that first episode where we kind of broke the ice and explained the beginnings of the ICW, we covered some stories that Rip Rogers had told, and Rip had been there since day one, literally day one. He was in and out of that territory basically the entire time it was up and running. And Rip told some stories, the frugal stories of Angelo Poffo, and he had mentioned that how in order to save some money, they would have the boys stack up in a hotel room. I can't remember the number of guys Rip said the record was. They're trying to sneak so many guys into one hotel room to get some sleep.
12 or 15.
It was like 12, something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right there.
Yeah.
Were you involved in that one too, Bob?
Oh, no, I didn't travel. I couldn't travel with Angelo. And you know what? And those poor guys were traveling in the back of the rank truck.
That's what I was getting at. Yes.
Yeah, there weren't like, where they were laying on steel beams and, if they could find some mat. The guys that found a mat cover to lay on were the ones that got in there early. Some of those guys had to sit on a steel ring post the whole trip, bouncing up and down for 300 miles. Ugh. So, yeah, they were paying their dues. But Angelo, what Angelo did, I don't know if Rip brought this out, what Angelo did was he slept under the sink because there was an open space there. Mm-hmm. And no, he didn't insist on the bed or anything. And so he slept under the sink and let the boys divide up that you could take. He rented a single. He didn't rent a double. He rented a single, one bed. Right. And they would take the mattress off one, and 4 guys would be sleeping on each mattress, and the other people had to, find a way. Pile up.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the box springs would hold 4, and the mattress would hold 4, and the other 4 guys would have to, use coats or whatever. Mm-hmm. If the weather was warm, they might even go out and sleep in a truck. I don't know. But I never went on that trip, but I heard some of the horror stories about it. And, with guys like that, you have to realize they really want to be in the wrestling business.
No kidding.
Yeah. I mean, they're willing to sacrifice. Angelo Poffo was parsimonious. It made Ebenezer Scrooge look like the most charitable guy in the world.
Well, by the end of that movie, he is the most charitable guy in the world. So just to be fair, so you're saying the pre-sleep Ebenezer Scrooge before he was visited by the spirits, the ghosts, if you will.
Right,
so.
Right. Well, Angelo never got a visit.
Never got that visit. I get it. All right.
Well, he got that one. I already told a story about getting Ronnie Garvin out there. Yeah. He got that one guy with Gary Sabol. Went and talked to him, and he brought Ronnie out his money right away. So apparently, at least one guy got to him.
I
don't know what Gary.
Goomba's past, perhaps. I'm not
sure. I don't know what Gary said to him, but I'd give anything to know. If I run into him, I'm going to ask him because to get the Major to part with money. I often felt he'd rather, have a toenail ripped out or something than give you $50. Well, that was him, right. And he came up during the Depression, and a lot of people that grew up in the Depression, my mother-in-law was the same way. She was always, even though times had recovered, the economy was great. The economy had been great before the Depression too. So she was always worried and always concerned and wouldn't spend a dime because she was worried about, having another one happen. So I understand the mentality. I lived with it for a couple of years. That effect, having Randy and Lanny driving in the car with him and then have them sleep in the car rather than get a room, they sleep in the car and then go to the next show or whatever. That's not really a great way to bring kids up, I don't think. Lanny, you never could tell. But Randy was seriously affected by it. The Randy Savage that everybody saw in New York was exactly the same guy that I first saw. When I first saw him the first time before anybody had a clue.
Stardom didn't change Randy Savage. He was always that crazy.
Yes, he was always that intense.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he was always, it was. I don't know if that was his working personality or if that was who he really was. He decided I'm going to be a pro. He was going to be a baseball player, but right. He hurt his arm. So okay, now I'm in this other field, and I've got to start because my dad can get me, and at least get the door open. So he creates this character, and oh man, did he live it? I mean, he took it all the way to the top. He was up there with Brisco and Hogan, and you're going against the top people in the world. You've made it. I reflected on the fact that in his interviews and the way what I read from gossip and behind the scenes was that he hadn't changed. He was still the same. That wasn't a work that I was seeing in the beginning. That was him.
What are you trying to say there, Bob?
Yeah. But I give him his due. We said it a minute ago that he wasn't given the greatest upbringing in terms of being normal or kind or generous, and yet he went on to have a fabulous career.
And he seemed to do a lot of good charitable work. Whenever they would show anything through the WWF anyway, back in the day, Randy was always first and foremost right there, involved in any charity events, especially involving kids. And so it seems like he gave back in that degree, you know what I mean? So,
I can't tell you, Ray, how happy I am to hear that, because I never saw that side of Randy, not one time. I never saw him be kind. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Because I don't want to dislike or disrespect anybody. What I have to do if that happens, I have to put them. They're orbiting Saturn right now, because I don't want to think about it. But I'm nice to know. If Randy was like halfway there, I'm turning the ship around and bringing him back, because it's nice to hear that. Just like it was nice to hear about Hogan signing autographs for the kids and all that.
Yeah,
it's nice to hear that there are good people behind those personas. Some people believe their own publicity, and a lot of heels, especially before the kind of expo, made it sports entertainment rather than good against evil. Heels wouldn't sign autographs because it was you're a bad guy. You weren't supposed to sign autographs. The typical heel move was to have a kid come up and offer an autograph or a program and a pen, and the heel would take it and act like he was going to sign it, and then he'd tear it up and break the pen and throw them back at the kid. And I don't know if they hired these kids or what, but usually the kid would start crying, and the heel had a ton of heat before they ever rang the bell. Angelo was very, very parsimonious. The story, I think we talked about the story of him trying to get out of paying that $1,000 to the guy who got away from the sugar hold. Anyway, the guy got away in under a minute, and Angelo didn't want to pay him.
Well, the law took care of that. Like I think I said when we discussed that in the past, Angelo tried to fight the law, and the law won in that particular instance. So he had to pay up, unfortunately. I guess that was. I wonder if that marked the end of Angelo's silly challenges that he would put out there. You think that would have done him in after that one? I would guesstimate.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to do it. I kept telling him this. This is a bad idea. There's nothing to gain from this, but they wouldn't listen. But you know what it was? It was an extra event for him that didn't cost. I didn't get paid for doing that. I didn't go when I went out against these guys. I didn't get an extra $50. It was just kind of expected of me because I was a junior partner in the company, 10%. And I was risking my butt too, because a lot of these people had no qualms at all about scratching your eyeballs out or biting you anywhere in your body. And, I'd always be checking them out for, I'd have them get a headlock. I checked their pockets to make sure they weren't carrying something. Because I had a guy pull out a little knife one time. You know what I did?
Let him go.
I jumped out.
I don't know, man.
I jumped out of the ring.
There you go.
And made sure he wasn't chasing me. And I picked up a chair and I slid back into the ring with a folding chair. And all of a sudden, he was the one to decide to leave the ring. Yeah.
It's tough being a heel back in the territory days, man. That shit was real, damn it.
Well, some people acted like it was. It allowed people to go out and be completely outrageous in terms of their normal behavior. Say you're a company executive, or maybe you work in a church, maybe not the pastor, but, you're the choir master or something, but you're a human being. You're not a religious zealot or anything, but you have this image. Well, you can go to the matches and you can scream now. These guys probably aren't out there doing a lot of swearing, but you can scream horrible things about, no good. That's, you can scream and be as vociferous and as loud and angry and stomp around. And, a lot of people want to be part of the show, especially if the TV camera's around. So they would like to get out of their seat and stomp around, come up and bang on the ring and draw attention to themselves. And you had to watch that, because if too many at a time did it, all of a sudden somebody get the idea, well, I got too many people around me. I think I'll get in the ring, so I'm by myself. And then everybody was going to follow him in the ring too. You had to discourage that first guy. I told a story. I'm not getting off topic, but no. Angelo, money was more important to him than how people regarded him. He didn't care if you disrespected him or disliked him or hated him. He didn't care about that at all. He didn't value your respect. He cared nothing about my respect or Ronnie Garvin's respect or anything. All he cared about was money. And so he could do anything he felt like and with no qualms, just nasty, not providing security in an event where Iggy Slapowitz gets the crap kicked out of him and then fired him for complaining about it. Yeah, Angelo was, maybe he was happy being that way. I don't know how. You can't put your own persona. I've got some persona that aren't the greatest in the world. I've tried to shrink them down to where they're all littler than little people. But, I can't imagine being that nasty and ugly and being happy with yourself. But again, if money's your God, and you look at that bank account, and you say, hey, I'm doing good. Maybe I screwed around 50 people today and I stole their money, but boy, aren't I smart. Look at that. I got another extra $500 in here that I didn't have. And there's people like that. I think Angelo was, I try not to make character judgments, but did Rip Rogers go into detail about what he did in the car with the?
Yeah, we've told that story here. I don't know if Rip's told that story, but you told the story of what.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've talked about that on the ICW stuff.
How could you be any more disrespectful to someone? Maybe climb in their bed when they're asleep and go, take a dump on their face. But other than that, I don't know how you could be any more respectful than what Rip did. And Angelo never registered, never stopped the car, said get out or stop that or whatever. It was just unbelievable. The debts that money would do to somebody.
And for those of you curious, anybody who might have missed the episode or don't recall what Bob's referencing, Rip Rogers decided to whip it out and pleasure himself right in front of Angelo Poffo, who was driving the vehicle, Rip Rogers riding shotgun, and just got bored and decided, I'm going to do this. And I don't know if he did that just to fuck with Angelo or what the deal was, but yeah, like you said, man, it was Poffo was very much tunnel vision, and he had to be in that instance to very much money driven. But as I started to bring up this question, I don't think I ever actually mentioned the question, although we got into the topic of what the question was, and that was the frugalness and the stories behind the man of Angelo Poffo. And I want to credit the listener, Jimmy Gomez, for sending in the question. But I guess another part of the question, too, was answered almost immediately by you in regards to the boys having to ride with the ring truck, the trailer or whatever the ring was in. And he said something along the lines of, how were they positioned in there? Because it doesn't sound necessarily safe. I've been around a few rings and trailers and trucks in my life, Bob. Not a great place to sit right there in between all that steel, especially the posts and things of that nature. So I can only imagine. But you talked about those boys really paying their dues. They're getting hemorrhoids, too, I'd have to imagine, sitting on that cold, hard steel going up the hollers of Kentucky. Unbelievable. But it's a fun time, I suppose, I guess. It's a story to tell your grandkids. I'd never heard of these guys coming out of the woodworks to tell these stories, but it's a different world for sure.
Yeah, they have these movies that are based on someone coming from nothing, from getting a break of some kind to where all of a sudden they become super successful or happy or something happens that completely transforms their life. Well, all these guys that were, the ones that were getting in the truck, and there were some guys who had been around a while. What they were is they were in the business of being professional wrestlers, and they were technically, and accurately, they were pro wrestlers. Well, that was a big deal because Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk and Jack Brisco and Andre the Giant, and all those people were pro wrestlers too. Well, they were in the same club with these guys, even though they were like, beginners, just almost amateurs. They were in the same business, and that meant a lot. It wasn't like if you want to become a air conditioner repairman, you have to go to school for 2 years to learn how to do it and then I think pass some kind of exam. You can become a wrestler in one match automatically. Load your truck up right up there, go out in a match and get slaughtered in 15 seconds. But you're in the wrestling business. Now you're a pro wrestler. And there were guys a lot of these guys came from, there weren't a lot of junior the third type executive children. Most of these guys, and that's not a put down. A lot of guys came from, escaped from very, very unfortunate environments that they were brought up in. They got onto a lot of the stories of guys who when the carnivals came to town before television and before they had air conditioning. Every show at a carnival usually had an athletic show. They offered the old gimmick of, beat the wrestler in 3 minutes or whatever, and you win $20 or whatever. Back at that time, $20 or $50 or $20 would be like $100 today, or maybe more. And it was, that was rigged too, only in the sense that the guy that they were wrestling, very seldom, he didn't look like Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant. It would usually be somebody that didn't look at all threatening, but who knew all these vicious hooks and knew how to make guys give up with about, you can get hold of one toe maybe and make them give up. Angelo, I don't know if he was around at that time. He might have been. He started pretty early, I think. He was, oh boy, was he tight. He was tight with his money. I still want to know how Gary Sabak got him by a check to Ronnie Garvin for multiple thousands of dollars with just one little touch.
Hopefully that's a mystery we can solve over time. Again, I'm in the middle of doing the research for ICW. Maybe that's something we can uncover, and we'll have to get back and report it here also on the Stoop in the years to come. Now, Angelo Poffo, you talked about how long you've been in the business. I think he broke in around 1950, so he had been certainly around the business for at least nearly 30 years by the time the ICW was formed. So he was already getting up there in age, I would have to imagine. He
wore a mask. He went as the miser.
Yes.
But, he also, I don't know if this is it's an accomplishment. Usually a lot of times what motivates the behavior might not be the most positive thing. It's because the person's psychotic or just totally insecure or whatever. But I think he set a record for doing like 6,000 sit-ups in a row.
Yeah, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but he kept it on the back of his trunks, on the back of his jacket. He was proud of setting that record. I believe it was on Ripley's Believe It or Not back in the day.
Well, it was extraordinary.
It was in the Guinness. It was in the Guinness book, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary to be able to do that many. Now, I don't know if they ever taped that, but I don't know if they were full sit-ups, but if they were, where he went all the way back to where his head touched the ground. Now you can get on in the gym, you can get on these boards and they have a strap you can put your feet under and you can incline the board where it's actually harder for you to sit up. But the people aren't usually doing full sit-ups. They put their body at basically where their abdominal muscles start to act. They work that area because they don't need to work everything else.
And there was no break either. I think it was something like 6,000 and some sit-ups in like 4 hours. So,
yeah. No.
Holy cow.
No break. No, there was no break. Randy and Lanny are both gone, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a shame. I don't know Lanny might be willing to tell a story if he knew, but I doubt Randy would. But
Lanny was very protective of his family, but he would, let out some stories here and there. So it just took him a little time to kind of warm up to the idea of telling some of the stories. I'm sure he took a lot more with him to the grave than the ones he's told, however. But, I mean, it is what it is. You protect your family. You don't want anybody looking bad and things of that nature. And Lanny he was kind of out there too, but in a different way. And I think you could tell he seemed to understand that some of the things that went on in that Poffo family wasn't necessarily the norm. But, even still, he, like a good son or brother, he protected his family. So good for Lanny. Unfortunately, he was the last to go. The Poffo family, no more here in the wrestling business. That was kind of a surprise to me. But, Randy died fairly young himself, the heart attack. But you could blame many years of perhaps steroid abuse contributes to that. But Lanny also passes away young. So you have to wonder if there was maybe some hereditary heart. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some kind of genetic deal there. But we're going to move on. We spent a good half hour here on ICW, which is always fun. So Jimmy Gomez, we want to thank you for asking the question in regards to any stories about the frugality of Angelo Poffo. And he was extremely curious how the boys would ride to the shows because he had heard our show on Regional Wrestling where we talked about sticking all the guys in the hotel room. I appreciate you reconfirming that with the Rip Rogers story, by the way. And then, of course, just trying to envision, I guess he just found it hard to believe, say half a dozen wrestlers or more were sitting, on the ring, basically is what they were doing to hitch a ride from one town to the next. And that's just the way it was. I mean, that wasn't the only promotion that might have happened in, but it was the most outlaw of outlaw territories there ever were. That's for sure. Oh yeah. Was the ICW. And we love it for that. It's some good stuff. Anybody gets a chance to go to YouTube and try to find just the footage that exists out there. Just, do yourselves a treat and go check it out, especially some early Macho Man, always good times. But, another question here, Bob. And this is a little more. Well, we started off on a high note. We had a great time. Now we got another guy who writes in here. His name is Joe, so it's just Joe. Don't blame him for not wanting to reveal his full name because his question is in regards to wrestling predators, and he lists off a few here that we heard about. Bob, I don't even know if you're familiar with some of these names or what they did, but Bob Sweetan, Buck Zumhoff is on the list here of guys who went to prison, basically, or things of that nature in regards to child molestation and that type of stuff. But his main question here is in regards to Grizzly Smith, and Joe wants to know, are you familiar with Grizzly Smith's background, his history outside of the wrestling ring? So he's curious if you worked with Grizzly at all in the ring, how he was as a wrestler, but also wanting to know your take on Grizzly Smith, the human being.
I worked with one of his tag team partner, Luke.
Yeah, Luke Brown.
I worked with Luke, and I don't remember ever working with Grizzly. Maybe, you know what? I should look it up. On Wrestling Stats, there's a list of all the people you worked against. I don't know why I don't go back and look at that. But where I got to work with Grizzly was working for Bill Watts.
Right.
He was the Bill's man on the road. Now, Ernie Ladd ran the shows, but Grizzly was watching the box office and doing the things I did when I was an agent for Ole. He didn't have much to do with running the shows because Ernie had all that in hand. And, when you had people like Junkyard, they had some great talent there. When you had people like Junkyard Dog and Kerry Von Erich and Jimmy Garvin and Ted DiBiase, Paul Orndorff, myself, I was a good talent at that time. I mean, in terms of working ability, he had a great crew, and Grizzly didn't ever say too much. I remember I've told this story before, but not from this angle. When Jack Brisco, to preface it, when Jack Brisco and I, in 1969, when we first discovered pot together, neither one of us smoked. It was exciting because, it was a new kind of a feeling, but than just getting drunk or, like drinking too much beer or whatever. Mm-hmm. You got high, and there was a song we liked, Janis Joplin song, that we just would sing along with, me and Bobby McGee. and we would get high and we'd be screaming the song, singing along, just having the greatest time in the world, and just me and him, because we had the kayfabe. I mean, you couldn't let anybody. Oh, when we got to a couple towns, like one time, one of the office, Lester Welch's son, who was going to report anything, insisted on riding back with us from Tallahassee, like 250 miles, which means Jack and I weren't going to be able to smoke in front of him because he would trip us. I did have the good fortune of Jack, when I were driving, we were kind of kidding around, and he goosed me, like he reached up and tickled me. And I lost control of the car and did a complete 360 where I went all the way around. I stayed on the road, but spun all the way around and kept going in the same direction we were at. Both back doors of my car came open, and this Roy Lee Welch was sitting in the back seat. And Jack and I said, hey, grab those doors, will you? And Jack and I just went on talking and laughing like this was just, believe me, believe me, my nervous system was in high gear too, but I was going to work like this was just normal crap, because the idea is, well, maybe this kid will say, hey, look, I don't mind being a spy for you, Dad, on these guys, but, it's risking my life. I really don't think I want to ride with them anymore. But
now, was this Roy Lee Welch or Jackie Welch? Yeah,
it was Roy Lee. I don't remember ever having the brother. I don't remember ever rode with. It was Roy Lee, and he was a nice enough guy. I mean, none of the people from that area in Tennessee, Alabama and Tennessee, whereas this is not a knock, but being physical or looking like an athlete was not a consideration. You didn't have to look like an athlete. You could look like a watchmaker or a olive grower, or you'd be 5'8" and 175 pounds.
What exactly does an olive grower look like? I mean, are you stereotyping olive growers now, Bob? Come on, man. We don't do that here on this program.
Well, you don't imagine Andre the Giant picking olives. You would think
that would be a great job if Andre couldn't have been a professional wrestler. He could have been a professional apple picker. Didn't really need a ladder or anything.
You're right. You're right.
See?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I heard it was a hobby.
Don't pigeonhole these guys into job titles.
Yeah. So Roy Lee and his brother, I never saw them work out ever, and they got in the ring. I never saw them in the gym. And they didn't look very athletic. I mean, I'm not trying to knock them, but they didn't have to, because George Goulas was on top, and because Nick Goulas, the promoter, was his father for years and years and years, and so he didn't, and it wasn't what he looked like. It's who he beat. He beat people like that were twice his size.
Right.
Anyway, it worked, apparently. They kept them drawing and not well enough to stay in business.
How does this tie into Grizzly Smith is my question at this point.
Okay. Grizzly, what happened is I was leading into the fact that Jake and I became close.
Okay.
And we roomed together on the road a couple times when we went up into Michigan. And we smoked pot together. And I think up there you could get sleeping pills from the doctors. You could get, doc, I can't sleep and all that.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Halcyon, I think was one of them. We could get the pills, and you could drink a couple beers, and you had a real nice high going. Now, we weren't driving down the road in most cases. Up in Ohio, we would be working in the town we were going to be staying at that night. So we could be in our room or in the bar. Usually, I didn't go to the bar as much. I had had enough bar time by the time. So, well, Jake and I got to know each other, and I liked him. He's a very, very charming, engaging guy. I mean, great sense of humor. But he told me one time, he said, yeah, my dad raped my babysitter, and she's my mother. The babysitter became my mother. And, what do you say to that? I said, well, and here we are out there that one time in Watts territory in the South, where I told a story about the table and all the guys are in the same dressing room, and Junkyard Dog's on one side and Jake's on the other, and they did a drug comparison. And Dog emptied out one of these big purple Hagen purple cloth bags,
Right.
and he had about 19 different kinds of things, a piece of hash about the size of a golf ball. And then Jake emptied out his, whatever he had his stash in. All he had was pills. He had about 1,000 of them, but 7 or 8 different colors. He was dating a nurse at the time. Well, his father, Grizzly Smith, is standing right there watching all this. And I'm looking at him. Like, I mean, I knew everybody knew. We talked about this in earlier shows about, he said, apparently everybody on my crew is a drug addict. Well, he was right. Maybe not an addict, but was using. I was thinking, well, there's Grizzly and the Booker. I still have my Florida mentality. And the Booker, Ernie Ladd's right over there looking over, doing something over his book. Well, Grizzly just watched. He didn't say a word. He just stood there and watched, and he didn't smile or he wasn't stern. He didn't express anything. He didn't give any expression. And this is his son sitting in front of it. And when I looked over to see what Ernie was doing, he was rolling a joint. Now, I want to say something. Ernie Ladd was a wonderful, fine man. One of the best in the business because he had a lot of heart. He had a lot of courage. He was a man. I mean, I'm not sure if I know what a man is, but if there is such a thing, he was one because he went down to the Deep South and made interviews that had white boy in the interview, if you can imagine that, way back in the 60s and 70s. It's like, you are suicidal, obviously, with that kind of interview. But no, what he was saying is bring it on. And when you're 6'9" and 320 pounds and, you've been fighting your whole life, maybe it's not that big a deal. But I sure admired him for it. I've been thinking about it lately. And I think if I had one fault with Bill Watts, it was Bill knew that story. And I don't know. It's a wrestling business, and apparently there's nothing too bad to do in the wrestling business.
It seems that way, or at least it used to be that way. I don't know if it works in the nowadays times, but it's certainly
no.
It's like a different world, Bob. It really is when you go, well, yeah, and the wrestlers and typical, nowadays somebody says, oh, so-and-so did this, and everybody's appalled, and we'll never talk to that guy again. They get canceled. They lose their TV program. But back in this era, the territory era, specifically professional wrestling, and beyond, honestly, I've heard some stories about some of the wrestlers when the big boom period, in the late 80s into the early 90s. But it's insane, the stories you hear that a lot of these guys did. And that's just the stories that are out there. It's not the ones that haven't been told. And the other boys, I'm not saying that they're like, oh, way to go. But they're like, they just tell it like it's a matter of fact. It's just part of the wrestling business. You have these pedophiles. You have these thieves, you have these, whoever it may be, that's just him. He just, he messes with kids, and you just kind of have to accept it. I mean, you don't have to, but that's just what the boys did. You have to compartmentalize it. It's like, okay, that's him. He's doing that shit over there. That's not me. I got to worry about Bob Roop.
Well, if I had ever seen one of the boys with a child, I would have had to do something about it. I couldn't have tolerated that. Now, the girls did not look like, I was a grade school special ed teacher for many years. The girls didn't look like little children. I used to pick up my son. This isn't a side, it's just a brief one. When my oldest boy went to middle school, which started up here at 6th grade, I used to go pick him up from school after football practice, and while I'd be waiting for him, there would be girls coming out. And I had worked at the elementary school when some of these girls were in kindergarten, because I'd been working there for like 10 years. And some of these girls walked out, and now they're 7 or 8 years older, and they're in 7th or 8th grade, and they come walking out, and I'm telling you, some of them look like grown women. I mean, they had developed, they had reached puberty. and they had developed, and they were dressing like they saw on TV, Farrah Fawcett or whatever. And I time myself with that. I date myself with that comment, but they were all. I mean, they exuded sex, quite frankly. And I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to. I'm undersexed of anything, but they, So the same thing within the wrestling. A lot of the girls didn't look like they were 10 or 12 or whatever. They looked like they were at least in their late teens. And a lot of them had IDs that had their picture on them, like a driver's license, that said they were 22 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, but, there were some cases. There were, I don't know, an orgy is different from, it's a very crude expression, but I pulling a train. There's a bunch of guys one after the other.
Sure.
I knew that was going on a few times. There was no way I could stop it. The girls were willing. They were adults. And of course the boys were willing. So, I never took part in it, of course, but by that time, after being in the business and seeing so much crap and so much, boy, shires, lying and cheating and duplicity and swerving people around, it was very hard to be shocked by anything that you saw. And you might be disgusted, but shocked? No. As far as Grizzly Smith, I saw they did a special. Jake the Snake, after Jake Roberts, after he was so famous after his run up in New York, his drug problems made him he was like a national. They did 2 or 3 shows about him. Mm-hmm. One with him being helped with recovery by another wrestler, Diamond Dallas Page.
Right.
Had a thing going, and he helped. He recruited Jake to come. Jake had been laying around so long, he'd gotten really overweight, and he hadn't worked out for years. And Dallas not only got him off the drugs, but he helped him work out too. And Jake told stories about what went on, and he mentioned his father. They showed a picture of him and his dad together. I think it might have been his dad's property. I don't know if Jake even owned any property. But they were standing about 15 feet apart, looking in different directions, and they didn't look like they even knew each other.
Yeah.
So it was his father. And children are genetically attuned to wanting to have their parents there to lean on.
Right.
So,
and you worked in Mid-South when Jake was there and Grizzly was always there, for the most part. And during that entire period, I'm assuming, especially since you got close with Jake during that period and hung out with him quite a bit, that you're going to tell me now, I'm going to ask you, did you ever see them get together, have a conversation, have a drink, anything like that beyond maybe Grizzly talking to him about business? Did Jake and Grizzly, I don't want to say affection because I don't see that happening at all. But did they ever act like father and son whatsoever? Did Grizzly ever come over and check on his boy? No? Wow, okay.
No. Oh, no. Jake was a really unique individual. He's one of the guys I took home with me when we were in Michigan. We worked in one side of the state, and then we'd work on the other side, the Grand Rapids, Bay City to Grand Rapids. Well, home in Okemos was right in the middle between them. So when we stopped, I told this, I stopped there. I took Jake one time, and I might have told this one too. Well, he's such a charmer. Plus, he's a big, tall, good-looking guy, and handsome, and great attitude, beautiful smile, and very, very charming. And he just charmed my mother. I'm not going to say out of her pants because she was way too old, but he treated her like she was a gorgeous young babe, and she remarked on him for 2 or 3 years. She said, "Oh, that one wrestler you brought home, that Jake, She said, "What a nice looking young man he was."
Yeah.
And Jake and I talked about a lot of stuff. The cocaine sometimes would bring on, gobbledygook. Need to talk about something, but he never talked about his dad. He never said anything. The only thing he said was that when he did tell me personally, my mother is, and Jake told me that personally.
Well, they did a Dark Side of the Ring on, I don't remember if it was the whole family, but the family was involved in the Dark Side. It was essentially on Grizzly Smith, though, and, a lot of the stories that came out about Grizzly, not just with that rape that Jake has talked to you about. Jake came out in a documentary back in the late 90s discussing that. You clearly heard about it many, many years way before that ever was divulged to the public anyway. How Jake, I guess his mother was the victim of rape. I think she was 13 years old at the time. And that was unfortunate. But, Jake wasn't the only family member that broke into the business. Grizzly Smith had 2 younger children. One would go on to become Sam Houston. And Rockin' Robin was his daughter, who worked for the WWF in the late 1980s. And she was on the dark side. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I watched it, but she alluded to sexual abuse towards her as a child from Grizzly as well. So,
man.
And there was other stories, in the dark side about how Grizzly would find, especially, in the deep South and places like that where people don't have a lot of money, and it wasn't uncommon for them to allow their daughters to go, teenage daughters to go, because they couldn't afford them. And, well, if you can take care of her, you can have her kind of deal. And Grizzly would go around to these type of homes and pick up girls, 12, 13-year-old girls, and take them on the road with them. And I don't know if he was paying the parents or what the situation was, and that was, I don't want to say it was common in the South, but there are stories, of things like that happening back in that time period.
That's insane. I never saw it. I went through my memory reel. I never saw him with a girl, and that means that he was very good at hiding it, because he couldn't have like a regular woman for like a 25, 30 year. I mean, he was 60 at the time, I think. You couldn't have a mature woman, or he could have had a mature woman there with him. But I never saw him like in a car or on talking to anybody at the shows or anything with any girls. So that means he was hiding it, because if he was doing these really young girls, or messing with these really young girls, he was doing it. He was doing it in secret, because first of all, it was illegal. He should have gone to prison about 50 times.
At least from the stories I've heard. At least. And again, I'm not knocking Bill Watts, but Bill, if you're out there listening, and I'll probably run into you somewhere, I'll ask you then. Why do you hire a guy like that? That was always my question, because these stories were out there. I'm not sure if all these exact stories are out there, but the ideas behind what Grizzly Smith did, outside of the wrestling ring, the stories were out there. A lot of the boys knew about them. There were whispers and things of that nature. There's no way that Bill Watts had never heard any of these. It's something at some point.
Right.
And that always blew my mind, because Bill Watts was pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure if somebody touched one of his kids, they wouldn't be here anymore. That would be the end of that human being. And so it's just odd that Bill, not only did Bill use him as a talent earlier and obviously as an agent for much of the 1980s, but he used him the entire time, really. I mean, like, Bill was always with Grizzly. He always had Grizzly working for him. It wasn't like, Grizzly worked for me for a year that one time, but it was there the entire time, and you knew this, he was capable of these things. Maybe all those stories weren't out there at that point, but some of them were, right? Jake's was. He was telling somebody, he told you, he probably told somebody somewhere. It's really interesting to see. Again, I go back to this whole wrestling business thing. It's like, you're a piece of shit human being, but this is, we're in the building now. So this is all pro wrestling, and that's all that matters. And it's really weird,
relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at uswapodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell back to talk to you about all the new and exciting audio and video podcasts we've been putting together over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. As a self-funded brand, this entire ship is powered by our patrons. It's your support that keeps all of these wonderful shows going here at WrestleCopia. And with that said, I wanted to mention that we now have 3 major tiers with tons of Patreon-exclusive next-level content for our Patreon supporters. And it all starts with the $5 all-access tier, which gets you early access to many of the weekly podcasts, at least a dozen monthly digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, the insanely detailed show notes for the Wrestling Memory Grenade Regional Wrestling, and the OG Monday Warfare podcast, plus random bonus video drops, archived old-school audio watch-alongs from the early years of the brand. And if that's not all, the brand new Patreon-exclusive podcast, Ranting Raw, featuring yours truly, Ray Russell, completely uncensored, unfiltered, with honest takes, taking patron questions and addressing various topics from throughout wrestling history. It is a whole lot of fun wrapped under the all-access tier for only $5, but things get even hotter with the VIP Superfan tier. For just a few dollars more, you get everything already mentioned in the all-access tier, plus as part of the VIP tier, a whole new slew of videocast series where it's not just your typical watch-alongs. Sure, we laugh, we have fun, but we're also breaking down the history, the context, and the why behind what you're seeing. And as part of the VIP tier, you have access to Dan Gennety's Puro Resu Academy videocast, the Coliseum videocast with co-host Gene Jackson, and the Monday Warfare videocast, Raw vs. Nitro, breaking down the history of the Monday Night War. Plus, you also get the Memphis 1985 folder of goodies and all show notes for the Puro Academy podcast and Gene's retro review show. Lots to be had there at the VIP tier. But wait, there's more. For those WrestleCopia backers who crave even more from the brand, we bring you yet another level of content fit for a warrior, because it is indeed the ultimate tier, which gives you everything from the all-access pass, everything from the VIP tier, plus you will receive access to the big ones video series featuring a lengthy look and discussion into some of the biggest pay-per-views, super shows, and other events from throughout wrestling history. It's also a great place to keep up with the big events that coincide with the Monday Warfare videocast and so many other big events from years gone by. You'll also have access to the newest big hit to the Copia brand. I'm talking about Regional Wrestling Unreal, the video series. Get ready for the next level in regional wrestling as we dissect territory history in video form. Watch along with us. But still, even more for your money, guys. You'll also receive access to the Treasure Chest, which offers patrons the unique opportunity to download and watch select rarities from wrestling history. And for those of you who are wondering what we offer, are contemplating joining a paid Patreon membership, or simply a curious lurker, a reminder there's a free tier at our Patreon that you can join as well. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, or look for the QR code where available. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
I told this story, I think, on a show somewhere. I don't remember where, and I hate telling it because, to me, it was really interesting, the way it was told to me and the fact that it even happened, but I'm sure it was just another day in the office to some of these boys. But the reason I hate telling it is because I promised to myself, I wasn't told not to, but I'm just trying to, keep the confidence. I was told a story that happened in WCW during your time there, Bob, actually, in 1990. It was at a pay-per-view in Chicago. It wasn't at the actual pay-per-view. It was at the hotel after the pay-per-view. There was a very popular wrestler, good-looking guy, great shape, good-looking guy, who was probably could have the pick of the litter. Whoever he wanted, he was going to take back to the hotel room. We'll put it that way. And he found a lovely lady at the bar, and he proceeded to take her up to his hotel room after he roofied her. He had, roofied her and taken her up to the room, and I guess raped her, did whatever he wanted to with her, and then dragged her body out into the lobby or the hallway and left her there when he was done with her. And the wrestler that told me this story, he saw it all happen. He was in the bar. He knew she was willing to go up there. She was going to do it with him no matter what. So I guess he came to him afterwards, and because he saw her in the hallway, he goes, "Dude, what the hell did you do all that? Why'd you do it? She was going to do you anyway." And this other wrestler said, it was just something to do. And that's the story he told me about this wrestler. And so, but he finished the story with, "Good guy though." And it just boggled my mind. I'm like, what? And that was the mentality of a pro wrestler, whether people like to hear that or not. Not all pro wrestlers, but I'd say the vast majority, certainly from that era and the eras before, was, well, he's a shitty fucking human when it comes to, raping ladies. But other than that, pretty good. He was good with me. He was cool in the ring, and, we got along at the arena. And it's weird how many times I've heard wrestlers separate the wrestling world from the real world when it comes to what these guys and maybe even some of the ladies would do outside of the arenas. It's just crazy. It boggles my mind sometimes. It's that wrestling bubble, and it's why I don't want to be in that wrestling bubble.
Oh, yeah. There. It's disgraceful. It's obscene. It's absolutely obscene. And what people like, well, in this case, Bill Watts, you don't understand that the weakest link in a chain is what will break the chain.
Sure.
And having someone like Grizzly Smith, a known pedophile, as one of your chief employees with a lot of responsibility over your money, for one thing. Grizzly, I believe, picked up the checks from all the shows. Bill didn't go all the shows, so Grizzly would typically be the one to collect. So you've got him in a major position of responsibility, a man who's a pedophile. Guess what? That's illegal. Not only illegal, it's obscene.
Yes, absolutely.
It's grotesque. What if it was your little boy or little girl, Bill, that somebody did that to? You would gladly empty a 357 Magnum right into their head and probably into their mid-body and crotch and every other place, and not think a thing about it. But you got one working for you. Well, I'm not going to make moral judgments. It's hard to explain that one.
Yeah, it really is. That always blew my mind from the time that documentary came out about Jake, and then all the other stories that have come out in the last couple decades in regards to Grizzly. Some of them not so secret, I guess, from back in that era. So it just always is in the back of my head. Why did Bill Watts deal with him on a daily? You know what I mean? I guess he trusted him. Again, it goes back to, I trust you when it comes to money. I trust you when it comes to the wrestling business. And that's all that matters when it comes to the wrestling business, I guess. And I don't want to speak for the Cowboy. I don't really know, what he did know, didn't know, what he turned a blind eye to, perhaps, what things of that nature. But it's just really interesting. That's always been, I've been curious about that for quite a while now. But I'm glad we got into that a little bit here on the program this week.
Please let me interrupt you for a second. And I'm looking for an out for Bill Watts, because I respect Bill, and that is such a stain on his reputation that it's very possible Grizzly would be the one to be reporting to Bill, maybe Ernie a little bit, but Grizzly would be the one actually talking to Bill, probably on the phone. He didn't go to Oklahoma or wherever he lived, and telling him about the shows. So, Bill was listening to someone acting in a very professional manner, and I guess it's possible. It's possible. It doesn't sound very probable, but it's possible he didn't know about what Grizzly was doing. I don't know. I mean, he probably knew the Jake story, but, Jake had grown up and, apparently survived the emotional trauma, although he hadn't. He still hadn't. And so maybe with Bill, he didn't know what was going on the road, because none of the boys, Bill didn't schmooze with the boys. I never saw him schmoozing even with Junkyard Dog. I mean, he would speak to him and all that, but I mean, he didn't, invite him to his house. Maybe he did. I don't know. But maybe he didn't know. And that's the only out I can think of.
And maybe he didn't want to know either. Don't ask, don't tell.
That's very true, too. You can always claim ignorance. It's not a defense in court, but it is defense in public opinion. Well, I just didn't know. It's hard. I don't want to be a hypocrite. There were times when I was not married or attached or had a girlfriend or anything, where I dated indiscriminately. But, I always where I met the girls were in bars, where in order for them to be in there, they had to be at least 21, I think it might have been 18 at the time.
18, I think, yeah. I think they had different levels of alcohol in the beers, so you could get in there at 18 back in the day.
But one of the things, if the girl looked young, I always checked her ID. Can I see some ID, please? I'm somebody I just met. But they're coming on to you, like it's letting you know, well, I'll go out with you if you want.
Sure.
But can I see your ID? And if anybody if they didn't have one, of course, I would say, well, you better get one because you look kind of young. I was in my maybe getting 30ish or a little older, but I looked a lot younger. I didn't look my age. And I learned from two marriages, but especially from my second one. Most women are emotionally and psychologically about 10 years older than guys their own age, because guys think with their muscles and their talents or machismo or whatever, and girls they think with their emotions and with reason and logic. Being a so-called weaker sex, which has changed a lot now with women's wrestling, women's judo, women's karate, and MMA, women's MMA.
And in the households too, Bob. It's changed drastically over the last, say, 50 to 70 years.
Yes. So I saw one wrestler, I'm not going to mention his name, he was sadder. He had a satire where the never overwhelming need for sex. I watched him go outside from the Imperial Room one night. He went out 6 different times in a 2-hour period with 6 different girls. Went outside to get in a van or a car and have sex, I assume. I don't think they were going out to sign autographs. So I was fortunate in being raised in a way, and this is not old Bob Roops, this or that, but if I didn't know the person and I wasn't comfortable with them, I couldn't perform sexually. So, and that was a blessing. I mean, I look at people say, "Oh, you couldn't get it up." No,
certainly keep you out of trouble.
I couldn't for people I didn't know, or I just met. Guys would talk. I remember I was telling a story the other day. But we were in high school in 7th, 8th grade. Somebody got a car old enough to drive. We had one of these high school graduates who wanted to hang around with the younger kids. Mm-hmm. He was old enough to drive. We drove down to a burlesque show in Detroit. And we were 7th, 8th graders. It was supposed to be a big deal. I saw a bunch of fat old women come out and take off a top and their boob. You know, I mean, it was about as sexy as, you know, smashing yourself in a toe with a hammer. And I thought, well, if this is what's a big deal, sexy. Oh, we went to a burlesque show. Oh, we're all sexy. Later on, when I dated a topless dancer, she told me what they thought of the customers. Believe me, it's a lot nastier than anything you and I've ever said about anybody. They thought every one of those guys was a fool and a mark and a real idiot.
Sure.
He said, I just had to look at this guy 3 times, and he had a 50 in his hand, and he changed it to 100 to tuck into my garter. And they all laughed at what a mark. Oh, what an idiot that guy was. Jeez. It only took, 2 looks. And the girls would laugh at him like they were just total idiots. And the only reason I overheard that was because I happened to be waiting for my date that night. I got off work early, and I went in the club to wait for her. She let me wait in the dressing room, and I was the girls, because I was with her, the girls accepted me. Well, I was listening to them talk. And they didn't care about walking around with their boobs hanging out because...
They do it all day, Bob.
Yeah, and they wasn't sexy to them. It was business.
Right.
So, and I wasn't, sitting there with my eyes popping out anyway. That didn't turn me on. But anyway, hearing her stories, yeah. But, back to that stuff about Grizzly and that kind of stuff, I'm sure it's not the only place that stuff like that went on, because there were always victims available,
right?
Young girls or boys coming in. I mean, there were gay wrestlers who they weren't going to go out with girls. Now, Chris Colt, I never saw him with anybody. What am I talking about? I never saw him with anybody. he never had any of the sexual escapades in front of me. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't have been there. I mean, what the hell? How the hell did I get to where I'm watching this? But from my understanding, the guys I saw him talking to were not. Well, we were in bars. You had to be a certain age, so. He was gay, but he wasn't a perv.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Gay, straight, or anything in between. I don't think I'd ever want to be in a room when Chris Colt was having sex. I don't even want to know what the hell was going on with that guy. Holy cow. But that's another story for another day, I suppose. You guys want to drop some art and, keep it to yourself, because I don't want to post that. But
yeah,
we've got another question. This is interesting because it's not a name. It is on my long list of names that we didn't really get to when we were covering your career here. But it was, I made a long list of names of guys that you crossed paths with in a territory. Either you worked with them or they were simply on the roster at the same time you were. And this is one of those many, many names. And Chris McGuire writes in and asks a fun question here. But Chris McGuire asks about your time working early on in Florida. This would have been the early 1970s. You would have crossed paths with a wrestler by the name of Joe Scarpa. Do you remember Joe Scarpa and do you know who he would become?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Joe was in Florida when I started, I think, but he definitely was there. I know he went up north and did the Indian gimmick, where, of course, he was a babyface, but, I mean, I'm not Indian, but Native American. Didn't he? Didn't he go up there and put on the headdress and all that?
For those of you out there stumped at the name Joe Scarpa, he would go on to have the most success in his career, later in his career, under the name Chief Jay Strongbow. And he would basically be the number 2 guy underneath Bruno. You would have Bruno on top or Pedro. And then it was Chief Jay Strongbow.
Yeah, Joe was a good worker and a decent interview. I was working babyface when I started in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he was a heel, but it might have been because he was a veteran that I never got in a car with him.
Gotcha.
I was never invited to.
He'd been in the business a good dozen years by that point. So.
Oh yeah, he definitely an established. Well, I was friends with Stan Steamboat. I never rode with him either.
Sure.
Well, actually, the reason why, mainly, is because Jack Brisco and I became friends. Jack was on top as a babyface. He headlined just about every show we went to. But our wrestling backgrounds gave us some common values that we could really quickly get to know each other. It's the same thing with the pro. I talked about it on a show last week or a week before about the difference between people who have been in the business having kind of an instant kind of a bond because you know where the other guy came from. He came from the same place you did or did a lot of the same things. A wrestling ring is a wrestling ring, whether it's 16 feet or 18 feet. If you don't know your way around it, it'll kill you. Like you can get hurt real bad in a wrestling ring all by yourself, just trying to get in and out of the dang thing. But I hung around with Jack. Again, we were kayfabing because we were breaking the. No, it was a felony down there at the time, so we had to be careful. But it made us both so much happier. We had fun. We're driving down the road screaming Bobby McGee with Janis Joplin and just laughing and having a great time. And, with wrestling being such a pain in the butt of being on the road every day, if you could even spend half of that travel time having a good time while you're going home, and what was really ironic was that my wife was my first wife, rest in peace. My son and our son together, still out there, and but my first wife wasn't happy, and she didn't like me wrestling because she wanted to live. We had a nice place in Florida with a pool. She wanted to live in Chicago, closer to her family and relatives. I wanted to wrestle, so I couldn't come home and be happy. I couldn't come home. Like Jack had dropped me off. We'd been laughing all the way home. I was stoned. We were, not stoned where I'm staggering around, but my mental capacity is obviously chemically enhanced in a different way.
Certainly.
I had to go in and pretend like I was not maybe miserable, but I couldn't go in like, hey, how's everything going? Because she was unhappy. So I had to act, like I was, just another day at this factory. But that's what made those trips with Jack so memorable, because it's funny. And I had to put on a better act in my own home than I did when I was out in the wrestling ring. And I got to throw in this little tidbit. I was talking with Todd Passmore, a.k.a. Barry Houston, the other day. We've been talking back and forth. He's a great guy, really good person. I really love him a lot. And I was telling him about this comment that I was wrestling against Dale Lewis, and the difference between him and like Frankie Kane. And even though I beat Dale, I was going back to the dressing room, and this one woman, I'll never forget it, said, "If that's the best you can do, you need to go back to amateurs." And it always stuck with me. It wasn't until the other day when I was talking to Todd, I thought the woman initially, even though I beat Dale Lewis, I thought initially what she was saying was that I was a lousy wrestler. I was lousy, like real wrestler, like wrestling was real, like she was believing it.
Right.
What she was telling me was that, because Dale would get these holds, and he would tell me, now just stay down there. He'd have me by the foot, and I'm laying there. My hands are free. My other foot's free. He'd want me to lay there while he could get heat by when the referee, he'd tell the referee to come over and check and see if I wanted to give up. And the hold he had didn't even look like it hurt. And I'm just laying there. I got both hands free. Like I can't do a setup, and grab him. But he wanted me to lay there, and he would put his foot in the rope, like he's put more pressure. He was, rest in peace, Dale. But he was lazy. And so what that woman was telling me wasn't that you need to be a tougher to be a pro wrestler. What she was saying, buddy, you better become a better actor. Because if that's the best you can do, out there, you better go back. We know you've been successful in amateur wrestling. You better go back to that. because you're going to be the shit as a pro wrestler. And, after all these years, I'm talking about this was in 1969. It took me all these years to realize what she was actually saying to me. And I think it's funny, that a memory you have turns out to be so different from what you thought it was. But, that's what she was saying. Where were we?
Joe Scarpa.
Joe, I didn't get, there was no scandals about him. There was no outstanding, I have no, really interesting stories about him. I didn't know him personally. I followed his career. I don't remember working against him. I might have, but I don't
know a lot of what he did in regards to babyface heel prior to the Strongbow gimmick, where he was a babyface for the remainder of his career after that. But everything I've ever seen, usually he was typically on the babyface side of things.
Right.
I think he was there the same time you were in '69. So right when you were breaking in. So
right.
That would have been one of the first guys you encountered in the locker room. And like you said, you being a rookie, literally the epitome of a rookie, and him being already a dozen years or so into the business by that point, I could see where, that wasn't like and, different ages and things of that nature as well. I could see where you guys weren't just sitting down immediately. Hey, I'm Joe Scarpa. Let's get to know each other.
Right,
Plus, you hear the stories of Joe. He wasn't the most, later on, once he retired, he became an agent for Vince McMahon, and he worked, in the locker room throughout the 80s and through the 90s. And a lot of the boys, some of the boys were fans of Joe. They got along, but the majority were not big fans of Chief Jay Strongbow, like the human being. Just he was gruff and hard to deal with. And I know the Macho Man specifically did not like Chief Jay Strongbow, but that's a story for another podcast somewhere. But it's there's just a lot.
That might be why I have no memories of him, because he was putting off vibes of, look, I don't want to really talk to you. I was already nervous when I went to the first dressing room, because I'm a newbie.
Yeah.
I haven't had a match, or I've had two or three, and I'm with these guys that I've seen. I watched every show, I watched every match, and I was seeing these guys go out there and have people screaming and yelling, and I didn't. I was barely able to get in the ring without, like looking like an athlete. So, Joe was one of the ones that kept his distance. That's why I didn't get to know him. And of course, again, Jack and I, if you think about it, Jack and I were both what was considered shooters, because we could wrestle for real. And Jack never got that. He had been pro long enough, like 10 or 11 years, that and it never stretched anybody, or not one of the boys anyway. So he didn't have that reputation, but I sure did. And the fact is that Graham had me stretching people in the snake pit, and twice in the Armory in Tampa, Fort Homer Hesterly had me twice go out there against people who weren't wrestlers, 3 times. The one time where my only choice was to break the guy's neck, I embarrassed myself by not doing at least something to him. Yeah, so the boys had seen me wrestle for real, and put these hooks on. It made some of them nervous about working with me, because they thought, well, if I hurt him, I hit him too hard or whatever, he might snatch me. And the worst thing for a wrestler in the world would be to be taken down and held down and not be able to, and be trying to get up and out and can't for like 10 minutes, especially if he's a big star. Last week he knocked out Big Bad John in 15 seconds. This week he can't get up from Tony Charles. Tony's riding him like a lamprey eel.
Right.
So yeah, that was their worst nightmare. It took me a long time to get over that. I had to get away from Florida, because no other territory asked me to be a shooter for them. I wasn't going to do it anyway. Well, they asked, but I wouldn't do it. And the few times I did, I insisted on being paid exorbitant amounts of money, and that ended that. They weren't going to pay me to go out there and risk my career. I mean, you don't need to be a great wrestler to pull a guy's eyeball out or to bite his ear off.
Sure.
All you have to do is be careless and say, well, yeah, but, he ended up, I broke both his legs and broke his arms, and, he'll never walk again. Yeah, but you're missing an ear, or the one they sewed back on, they did upside down or something, because you look a lot different. Joe and I never got to know each other. And the other thing was, he was swarthy, like he was real tan. He had black hair, but he wasn't, he was kind of paunchy. He was kind of yeah. Yeah, he wasn't real muscular, nothing. He wasn't like big fat slob, but, nothing about him stood out physically. But then again, you had guys like Louis Tillett, who would go out there and wrestle. Louis looked like Louis looked like a out of shape accountant, and he could go out there and get people to believe that he was for real. He'd go out there and beat people.
Yeah.
So, I saw that. I thought, well, this is an interesting business. You talk about being able now to give people like Louis and anybody credit. They were able to go out there over a period of time. If they had been able to get them over, to make people suspend their disbelief that they were what they looked like, which was basically somebody who wasn't too tough. They had gotten people to suspend their disbelief. So I'm giving them credit for that. Louis was talented. He was able to do that because he was short, never tan. His arms were about like 1/3 the size of Hulk Hogan's. He had a paunch. He didn't have much of a chest. His legs were kind of skinny. And yet he'd go out there and, boy, when he'd go to his comeback and he'd put his hands up and people start screaming. So seeing is believing. But I saw worse than that, go out there. But I'm sorry for, who asked about Joe Scarpa?
Chris,
I'm sorry, I can't give you more information about him. Well, if it's not there, it's not there. I'm not going to make up anything.
No.
I never heard anything bad. The boys are telephone, telegraph, telewrestler.
Yeah.
I never heard anything really horrible about him. Actually, the worst thing I've heard about him was today with what you were telling me, Ray, about his reception as an agent.
Right. I would think a lot of agents get that, though, especially if, they're not in your favor, particularly, or whatever. A lot of the boys would just refer to him as a dick. I mean, if that's the worst thing somebody can say about you in the wrestling business, you're halfway made, I guess, because there's a lot of dicks in pro wrestling. But nothing scandalous coming out about Chief Jay Strongbow. But I will say, you breaking into the business in '69, it's 1970 that he goes up to New York and becomes the Chief Jay character. And so it was so close. And again, like I said, the number 2 to the world champion, whoever the world champion was, had the main event, but Chief Jay would work the B shows on top. He would headline. He would do the Indian strap matches throughout the 70s. So he had a lot of big time feuds and things of that nature there. They even redid the big infamous angle in Mid-Atlantic where they did Greg Valentine had the I Broke Wahoo's Leg shirt. He broke Wahoo. After he did that in Mid-Atlantic, he went up to New York and he broke Jay Strongbow's leg, another Indian character, right? So, but it was so funny to know, like, Wahoo had some background, like he had some history, some heritage, if you will, in the Native American world versus Jay Strongbow, who was 100% Italian.
Right.
he got the Strongbow character, but he got it over and he rolled with it. And for the next better part of the decade, the entire 1970s, I mean, he was a made man up there in New York. And it's amazing how you can, a simple gimmick change sometimes can make you like wrestling too, right? You put a hood on him and has a whole nother career.
Yeah. I worked with Johnny Walker when he was, before he put the mask on.
Right.
And he was a great worker. I mean, we had a great match, but he just, he was balding. He had that male pattern baldness, so he had very little hair on top. He looked in shape, but he wasn't like cut. He wasn't like toned and cut. So, and he was a great worker. I mean, I had a real good match with him, and I was fairly green. And so I was really happy for him. And his wife made me a jacket too, without charging me as an arm and a leg. And she was very pleasant to meet and get to know a
I know
little.
she made a lot of outfits and things like that. She was, wrestling too. Anything you saw him wear, obviously, that came from her, and he had some nice jackets and things. So she was pretty talented at that.
Well, another thing about Johnny was that, as far as I know, he was a very decent person. We've been talking about some real creeps, and he's not one of them, as far as I know.
No, he can come off as grumpy. We have a running joke on my regional wrestling show. We refer to him as Grumpy Grandpa #2. But outside of that, no, absolutely. You never hear nothing negative about him. He was consummate professional in the ring, that's for sure. He had a nice career after he put the hood on. Anyway, that was a Jerry Jarrett idea, if I remember correctly. I think Jarrett came in. That was when they were doing the Georgia War, and Jarrett decided let's stick him under the hood, and it got over fun. To quote the American Dream, anyway.
Well, can you imagine? I don't know what Johnny's age was, but he had to be nearing 40, if not over 40, when he put the hood on, and his career took off from there. He'd been making a living because he was great. I don't know his background. I don't know if he was ever on top anywhere else, even when he was maybe younger and had more hair. And it wasn't that he was a bad-looking guy. It's just that
he was one of those guys that looked older than they actually were.
Yes. He wasn't. You had people like Jack Brisco, who was cosmetically, a very attractive guy. Dark hair, tall, dark, and handsome. Well, if you're standing next to him, you look like 2 cents waiting for change in comparison. Yeah, I was glad. Again, a good guy. A good family man. I mean, I don't want to hear that later on he divorced his wife and tortured his children or whatever. But as far as I know, was a good man throughout his whole life, and that's nice to know.
Yeah, it's always good when you hear about the good ones. We talked about some of the bad ones earlier, and that's always good to end on a high note and talk about some of the good ones that came through the wrestling business as well. And on that note, guys, we're going to wrap things up here this week. I do encourage everybody to stop over to the brand new website, bobroop.com, for all things Bob Roop. Still a little bit of a work in progress, but it's like, say, 95% done. Lots of pics and clips up, a little bio there. And Bob going to be working on a blog here. And
yes,
little area there for you guys to send him in questions, or just let him know what, give him some hate mail, whatever the case, whatever tickles your fancy.
Yeah, it's still a work in progress. There's enough there that you can go. I mean, websites are rated by how many people come to visit them. If you have a million visitors, sometimes when you click on wrestling, you'll be number one. Like if it was something like Hulk Hogan. Mine would probably be 150th on the list, which is fine for right now because it's not finished. My plan is when it's completed, I want to get my first book, Deathmatch. I want to get I've got about 45 pages. I want to get the cover and the back cover and the 45 pages so people who might want to buy the book can read the first 45 pages, which is it's a mystery, and it has a Japanese wrestler who's an assassin who comes to the United States in a criminal thing. And I have another guy who's just breaking in the wrestling business. So he goes through all the first match jitters of having out there. Anyway, I want to put 46 pages or so people can read that. And I don't have that up yet. So, but you know what? I think that we're going to be back a few more times. And I'll be able to mention it again. But thank you, Ray, for mentioning it. Folks, please feel free to go and take a look at it and just get an idea where it's at. As we add to it, and another thing is part of it, is I'm going to get back on Facebook and the other social media and do some writing. I'm a trained writer. I train myself, so maybe I'm not that well trained, but I am. I've written 2 books. I'm going to get back and start writing again. Blogs and things like that, and that'll be the time to bring the website more forward and more prominently. One thing I need to add, Ray, is that in case nobody's aware of it yet, your values at age 83, they change. It's not that they get worse. It's just that some things are important and some things are not. If I was 50, I would have been in just a wild ass hurry to get this website up and get it running and everything, and start trying to make some money off of it. But now I'm not. I'm willing to wait, because one of my real enjoyments during the day is a nap, which sometimes might last 2 or 3 hours. Anyway, it will. That's a long way of saying it might be a few weeks or a month or two, but the site will be up, and I'll be grateful if you'll come look at it. So thank you again out there for being with us. Without you, and of course, Ray, without you, none of they wouldn't be able to have us to listen to. So I'm thanking all of you, but especially you, Ray. Thanks again.
Absolutely. And remember, guys, we are 3 on, which means next week we are off, Bob, but we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. I'm still working on the videos. Remember, guys, Bob sent me all of the great global wrestling videos, and I've been going through them and getting them converted and just kind of looking at all the stuff and what we can discuss and things of that nature in the weeks to come. We got that to look forward to. More listener questions, more stories to tell here. We'll be back soon, guys. Another edition of the Wrestling Stoop right around the corner.